CNET ready? CNET's ready. Supervisors ready? Call this meeting to order. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. 7:04. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. The meeting's being recorded live for CNET's YouTube channel. First up is public comments. Does anybody have any public comments about anything on or off the agenda that they would like to talk about? Hearing none, we're going on to approval of the minutes. We have the minutes of October 10th, 2024, the regular meeting, and October the 14th, 2024, the Supervisors' budget meeting. Do I hear a motion to approve those minutes? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion by the board? Call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Minutes are approved. Consent agenda, ratification of the bills list from 10/8/24 to 10/21/24. In the general fund, $24,813.26. Open Space Preservation Fund, $4,315.73. Park and Recreation Fund, the amount of $104.12. Ratification of the bills list for the period of 10/22/24 to 11/7/24. The following funds: the general fund, the amount of $63,077.33, and the Open Space Preservation Fund in the amount of $822. Do I hear a motion to approve? Do I hear a second? Moving second. Discussion? Call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Next up, Port Matilda EMS agreement.
Good evening, Cliff Neal from Port Matilda EMS. A couple of items actually that may not be related to this particular agreement, but the first thing I'd like to say is we recently were honored to receive not one but two grants from the Commonwealth, the LSA grants. And on behalf of Port Matilda EMS, I'd like to actually thank you all because Halfmoon Township was pivotal, Amy especially, in helping to secure these. One of them is for a wheelchair van, which we need desperately. We're going to be expanding our non-emergency transport services, hopefully in the not too distant future. The other one is for a loading system that makes it safer for both patients and for our staff to load and unload patients from the ambulance. So very, very critical issues for us. We have been trying to play catch up for almost 2 years at Port Matilda EMS with outdated equipment all across the board, both vehicles and a building. And we have been working diligently to try to secure grants to come up with ways to purchase new equipment, new vehicles. And I wanted to make sure that as these grants come in, because this LSA grant was significant, that people don't misread that as that's going to cover the cost of our service. A primary portion of our service is staffing, and I think if you deal with grants at all, you're going to find that none of these grants are applicable towards paying staffing. That's all exempted from almost every single grant across the board that we have. So we are still very, very much dependent on both the municipal support, but more importantly, the memberships, and that's what I don't want people to lose sight of, the fact that we need these memberships to come in, even though we are getting grants to purchase equipment. They do not cover staffing costs. Last but not least, I want to make a plea to the public that we're going to be losing one of our board members who is knowledgeable in financial planning and accounting. And if anybody would like to consider volunteering services for the area, it's a volunteer position for the Board of Directors for Port Matilda EMS. I would welcome any applicants for that to review and consider. I'm also here to answer any questions that any of the board would have for Port Matilda EMS.
What's your next big thing that's coming up that you really need desperately?
We have a number of large projects in the future. One of them is another ambulance. Our backup ambulance is, I think, 20 years old. So we're working on that. And the next thing we need to consider is to expand the building, actually. We now are going to have new vehicles and a new transport van, and it would be nice to actually have them indoors as opposed to sitting in the parking lot getting rust and snow and salt. So those are the large projects that we have, and we're trying to work on some means to accomplish that, both through additional grants that we've applied for, as well as we're working to try to get some transport, non-emergency transport agreements with different areas. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Okay. Phase 2 of this discussion tonight is a possible motion to approve the agreement between Port Matilda Fire Company and Upper Bald Eagle Halfmoon COG, or excuse me, the EMS tonight. That's the first contract. Do I hear a motion to approve the EMS contract?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion by the board?
Dave, just for clarification, that contract is between Halfmoon Township and the EMS.
Yeah.
That's what we're approving. Okay.
Yep. Dr. Neal, you have anything you want to add on to that?
No, I think we've gone through it pretty thoroughly from our end, and I would be more than glad again to answer any questions if there were questions lingering out there.
Yeah.
So at this point, both parties have been satisfied in terms of the agreement?
All right, call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you. Next up, Port Matilda Fire Company and Upper Bald Eagle Halfmoon COG agreement. Amy, did you want to?
Yeah, so at the October 1st Upper Bald Eagle Halfmoon COG meeting, both parties, the fire company and the COG, agreed to making some amendments to the agreement. One of the amendments was for the sale or acquisition of real or personal property of the Port Matilda Fire Company must be approved by the COG if purchased by municipal funds. So that was one amendment to the agreement. And the other one is there was an increase in the expenditures amount from $10,000 to $20,000. So anything over $20,000 needs to be approved by unanimous approval from all 5 municipalities. So those were the two amendments to the agreement that both parties agreed to.
Okay, anything else?
Nope.
I hear a motion to approve the agreement.
So moved.
Got a motion, do I hear a second?
Second.
Moved and second. Any discussion by the board? Hearing none, I'm going to call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Next up, Center County Long Range Transportation Plan Update.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ann Messner. I'm from the Center County Metropolitan Planning Organization. And as part of our strategic plan, we have put one of our goals to visit municipalities roughly every 2 years. Sometimes we'll have a project in mind, sometimes we won't. This time we have our next long-range transportation plan that has to be updated in September. If we don't do that, we're in trouble. So we're right now in the process of visiting all 35 municipalities. Next slide, please. So just a couple things about the MPO in case you didn't know. We have quite a few jobs. One of them is to keep our stakeholders aware of potential legislation. It's not unusual for us to review proposed rulemaking and make comments depending upon what we believe might be an issue for the MPO or Center County. And we also make sure we keep our stakeholders informed through our agendas for the Tech and Coordinating Committee, and we have a regular follow-up flyer that goes out to those that are interested to see what actions had occurred. We are required to do 8 plans. They have different schedules, but generally speaking, they all have to be updated every 5 years at certain points in time. And the one that we, like I said before, is the Long-Range Transportation Plan. As part of that, it's to inform future programming of roads and bridges and other related infrastructure. So the Transportation Improvement Program is the first 4 years, and that is where we know what funding we have. We've been given our financial guidance from the state, and we can program fairly easily. The 12-year program goes out to 12 years, and that gets a little unclear because our first 4 years are always solid in terms of numbers, but depending upon what other funding streams are available, the years 5 to 12 can move around a little bit, and so that's an estimate. And then finally, the Unified Work Program is actually staff's task list. So that's how we fill out our time card to make sure that we are doing everything we said we were going to do. And all of this is, like I said, to facilitate programming of state and federal funds for bridges, highways, transit, and active transportation, which generally speaking is non-motorized transportation. The long-range transportation plan is basically what it says. We typically have a 30-year plan. Many MPOs and RPOs go 20 years, but it takes so long for projects to go from aspirational to actually become a project that has been a long-standing decision to look further ahead than the typical long-range transportation plan. Each time we have one of these, we review our goals and objectives. Are we still meeting them, and what can we do that is better? And finally, like I said before, it has to be fiscally constrained. We don't have an option in that, and that's why we do have aspirational projects in the plan. So in case unexpected funds become available through whether it's federal or state legislation, we're actually ready. We can say, okay, this is something that we would like to do, but we knew at the time of the plan adoption it was not feasible. Many of the inputs should be pretty familiar. We always look at our demographics. We use census data to the extent that we can get other information, such as PennDOT's bridge condition data, crash data, pavement data. We use that as well. And then we also look for stakeholder input. So this is one of the stakeholder inputs, all right? But on some of our other requirements is related to what's called Justice 40, that we have to look at underserved populations such as low income and minority to make sure that projects are not adversely impacting those populations. It's an interesting review because many of these projects have taken so long to come to fruition that the populations change over time, and it's actually pretty rare that we have a big conflict. And then the plan also has to look at issues, and have we addressed previous issues, and should we continue to address those issues, or have they been resolved? We also have to have an action item of some sort, implementation, like once the plan's done, we just don't let it sit there. We have to think about, okay, what's reasonable for the next 5 years that we can do, because that's when our next update is going to occur. We have a public review once the draft is ready for review, and that's a 30-day time period that is required. And then once we see those comments, we try to edit as best we can within reason to then get to adoption. And the technical committee and the coordinating committee are the groups that review for final adoption, but they are informed throughout the process at each MPO meeting so they're up to date and there are no surprises. Touched on engagement before. There's a couple reasons why we have to do that. It's basically required, and it addresses some of the components of the federal planning factors in terms of how we look at our community and identifying issues and needs. We don't necessarily know all the concerns that exist. We can use data, but sometimes, data has its limits, and it's good to hear about other concerns. Related to that, we do work with PennDOT, both in their District 2 office and central office, because they are being given information that they have goals at the state level, and they want us to try to help implement those goals. And then finally, we work to address all modes. Haven't talked a lot about transit, but it is in there. As you know, we have CATA, and that is something that we also have to consider as part of our long-range transportation plan. Next slide, please. So what we're doing is a little different this time around. Several years ago, my predecessors came and spent roughly 2 hours with you asking a series of questions. Some of the information was applicable and some of it really was not within our purview. So we are looking at simplifying how we review your questions and concerns, and we have what I'll call is topic areas. So these are the 5 topics. What are your key corridors that you have concern? Are there any items of interest when it comes to alternative transportation modes? Are there gaps? Do you feel like some areas are seeing more use than others? Emerging technology. We are always trying to figure out what the next thing is, but it can be difficult to implement. But we know that in the horizon at some point, maybe it's 30 years from now, autonomous vehicles potentially will be in Center County, just as an example. And then on your day-to-day regular routine, what are your county or regional issues? You go beyond the limits of Half Moon, so I'm sure you see things that are concerning. And then land use. So certain parts of the county are growing. They are trying to accommodate, I'll say, demands in their corridors, and it's creating some congestion and safety concerns. Are you considering land use that maybe increases the possibility of congestion or other road-related items? I didn't really expect you guys to answer those questions tonight, but if you wanted to, we could float a couple of them, and then you can get back to me. It's really up to you. We have a deadline of March 14th. If you want to think about it and get back to us about those 5 questions. The other item that we have is a project request form. I don't think I sent that over, Amy, so I have to do that. So this is something we are trying as well. Same deadline, March 14th. One day is easier to keep track of than multiple days. And the idea is if you have something that is a transportation concern that you've kind of been sitting on, and you might have a brief scope, you might have a set of limits, an idea, to the extent that you are able to describe it in the form, we would also like those submitted by that date to help us understand some of the more specific concerns. We don't know exactly what kind of response we're going to get. We might just get an intersection. We might get, a quarter of a mile section of roadway. But we're hoping that there's some value in seeing what the concerns are so that we can either go to municipal services or LTAP to start working towards potential solutions, or if there's a theme, if there's multiple municipalities that have an issue, potentially there's a bundling of some type of project. Because as you know, the Center County also did bridge bundle for multiple municipalities, just as an idea, because we want to keep our transportation network in good repair. And I think there's only one more slide left. Yes, so that's our contact information. And I talked enough. Did you have any questions?
And you mentioned a project request form. Are they available? Where are they available?
Yeah, I'm going to send it to Amy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we had just finished it up,
Okay.
and I couldn't remember if I gave it to you or not. But yeah, it's a fillable PDF. To the extent that you can complete it, we would appreciate it. If you have something, it's not a requirement.
Are you asking for a response as a board or individual supervisors or just in general?
So I think our preference for the board is to have a group response.
Okay.
However, we will take responses from anyone, but it's a little bit easier if we're getting a single municipal response to say, yes, Halfmoon Township had this concern. But you're welcome if you think there's something else that's outside of the goals and objectives of Halfmoon Township to submit something else as well.
It doesn't necessarily have to be a consensus response, or would you prefer a consensus response? Because that's something that it could be everybody in the board would have an idea of what something needs to be done and not necessarily have consensus on it,
Sure.
or even know about it for that matter.
Right. I think consensus would be helpful, but if you can't do that, you're just have opinions that are just so different and thoughts, then just go for it. Worth Township decided that they were going to have each of their elected officials submit on their own. So we'll take whatever we can get.
We might have to have an internal discussion to see if we could come up with a consensus response.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
and we got plenty of time because it's not due till March 14th.
Right. And I know that sounds like really far away, but we were really worried we weren't going to get to all 35 municipalities before the first week of February. So.
Okay.
All right. Amy, would you put that on the agenda for next month's meeting? Just to bring up topics or
Yeah.
get a discussion
Yeah,
rolling?
I'll send out the project request form, and then if everybody wants to fill it out, then we can kind
Submit it
of
and
take those ideas
see where there's a
and discuss
consensus.
them. Yeah.
But if there isn't, you still want a response, right?
If you can't, if it's not important right now, it's okay. We're not going to hold it against you that you didn't
And
respond.
this goes for state, local roads, federal roads, whatever?
Yes.
Any transportation?
Yes. And some of it, depending upon the scale of the project, may be more aligned with a TIP project because it's smaller, but something much larger, for example, the airport connector right now is being discussed by some of our stakeholders. That is a very big and long-term project. So that would be something that would definitely be an LRTP project.
Thanks, Ann.
Yep, thank
Anybody
you.
have any
Thanks
other
for your
questions?
time.
All right, thanks for coming in.
Yep, sure.
Next up, permission to advertise the public hearing for December 12th, 2024 for the 2025 budget. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
I got a motion. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion by the board? Hearing none, call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Approved. Resolution 2024-17, records retention. Brett, I assume this is the standard?
Amy.
Oh,
Yeah, it's just a few items that we had. Some old ARPA accounts, checks, deposit slips. Yeah, just some funds that are no longer being used. And some old personnel employee files that have met the standards in the
timeframe.
retention, yeah.
okay.
And some old, some tax receipts that are able to be destroyed at this point. So it's
Okay.
just a few items, but.
Do I hear a motion to approve resolution 2024-17 on records retention? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion by the board? Call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Resolution 2024-17 is hereby approved. Next up, the sale of the 2010 and 2018 Country Clipper zero-turn mower and tank.
All right, so this is a couple of our zero-turn mowers that have had engine failures. So these machines have been replaced. The 2010 was scavenged for parts for the 2018. So I'm recommending that we just sell those as a package deal. Because like I said, the 2010 has been scavenged of a lot of parts. So that is the mowers that are not currently being used. And then the other thing, there's a 3,000 gallon plastic tank that was previously used as a salt brine storage tank. But that is not something that the township is currently doing or has the equipment to do. So at this point, that does not fit our needs. So I'm just recommending to the board that we sell those items using Municipal again. That seemed like it worked well for us last time.
Chuck, question, at what point did we use the salt brine? I'm trying to remember.
That's honestly a question I can't answer.
It's been long enough,
That was
right?
before.
2000, 2002, somewhere in there.
Okay.
It was the hot thing from the state. so-
Yeah, I remember that, because I remember seen the roads brine, but I just don't remember how long ago that was, but yeah.
Anything I want to add on the tank, and I don't know how the rest of the board feels about it, but I'm just going to throw it out there. There's been some experimentation, I think with some success, of using beet juice instead of salt. It's a lot less corrosive. I don't know if that's something we would use the tank for or not.
I am certainly open to the idea of liquid de-icing. It would require a large amount of other equipment to make that feasible. So,
Probably not going to be a doable thing in the near future.
probably not in the very near future. You know, and as this tank sits out in the sun, I mean, it's going to deteriorate.
How
more.
old is it?
I'm not sure. This stuff was
Probably
all here.
25 years old,
Okay.
or close to it.
I mean, I know the pump was seized up. I mean, everything is just sat and
It's corrosive.
certainly is. So like I said, you know, at this point in time, just to watch the tank deteriorate to the point where it's completely unusable, to me, seemed something I shouldn't do. So, like I said, you know, I'm okay with keeping it, but right now I don't see any use for it in the near future.
Okay, I'm waiting for a motion.
Okay, I move that we advertise the sale of the 2010 and 2018 Country Clipper zero-turn mowers and tank on municipal. Is that right? Is that the right thing?
Yes.
Okay.
There's a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion by the board? Call for the question. All those in favor say aye.
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 Did we miss a line? I missed a step here. With the advertised public hearing for the,
No, you
That's
did that.
we did that.
We did that. Okay. Permission to advertise for aggregate and bituminous bids for 2025.
That is just our normal bid process for both aggregates and bituminous for next year. So that one's pretty self-explanatory.
What are we paying a ton for asphalt in place right now? You remember what last year's bid was?
In place, I'm not sure what that bid was. This was more for
Materials stockpiling.
our own use, public works use. And those numbers.
I just wondered how bad the price of asphalt was.
Actually, last year, we started seeing some much better numbers. We were seeing some decrease. I don't know if it was just because we were reaching out and getting more competition, or numbers were truly coming down, but it's always interesting to see what we receive back.
All right, motion to advertise.
I move that we go ahead with advertising for aggregate and bituminous bids fiscal year 2025.
Here's a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded.
I'm watching the meeting.
Huh?
I'm watching the meeting.
Oh, you're watching the video.
Okay.
All right.
So, don't know what happens.
All right, moved and seconded. Any other discussion by the board? Call for the question. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, next up, township reports. Anybody have anything to add to the treasurer, secretary, or public works department? Okay,
Damn.
all right. Last but not least, adjournment. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
Actually, sorry, I apologize. we have the finance committee for COG today, so if I can just
Sure.
talk real quick about that.
Absolutely.
So a couple comments in terms of budgeting for next year. So there's been preference on behalf of our executive, or our finance committee, as well as the executive director, to do the program plan before the CIP. So that'll be an adjustment in timeline for next year, that we're gonna do the program planning first. And the reason is, a lot of the budgetary numbers for the CIP tend to change from the beginning of the year towards the end of the year by the time we get to the budget process. So, but just to see that, that'll be a little change in order of things. And there'll be lots of communication about that. So, you'll probably hear it more than you need to hear, but that change is coming. And also, my recommendation would be that we plan as a township, for some discussion time as that budget process occurs. I know some of you have said, well, we really don't have a choice, and they tell us what we owe and we pay it. But there's actually feedback that they want from us, and there's gonna be a feedback and more of a comment section within the budget. And the comment section will identify what townships will be saying, comments, whether it's in support of or against something in terms of the budget. So there'll be more of an opportunity for voices to be heard on the budget.
We
So-
do that every year.
Yeah, but the comment section isn't within the budget. And that's the plan, is it will actually be a part of the budget, so that when we're seeing the budget, we can see comments from other townships.
Okay, well, yeah, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah. So, but, we don't have to wait until the detailed budget
Because
comes
right now, we
out.
don't see comments from
Well,
other
the-
municipalities.
Correct.
We've
correct.
commented on the draft budget this year.
Yes, and we can have those conversations as soon as we start doing, budgetary comments within the finance committee. We don't have to wait until,
So
towards
what
the
are
end
they-
when Kim comes out.
What are they gonna do in terms of commenting on the program plan and the CIP?
Well, those comments then go back to the finance committee.
But are they gonna do those first? Because the program plan drives the CIP plan and drives the budget. So I think they need to start with a program plan review first,
That's what they are gonna do.
and then go to
The
CIP, and then go to the budget.
That's what they're gonna do. Whereas now they do the CIP first, but they are switching that and doing the program plan first. That's gonna be one of our timing changes. So just know that your CIP information isn't gonna come out like it did this year. It's gonna come out after the program plan stuff.
Okay.
So that is gonna change. And I'm trying to think if there's anything, other. Oh, one of the other things that, the new executive director is trying to do, and again, this came from advice from the executive committee, is try to get a handle on true costs of things. And so, for example, all of our administrative people, from our executive director to our HR person to our finance people, all have a role when someone is hired. But if that person is a Parks and Rec, you only see those dollars, the salary dollars, in the Park and Rec plan. You don't see all the other work that the other administration put into. So they're just trying to get a sense of what time is spent on different entities, to try to figure out how that gets billed back properly. The challenge is, for example, we had a new finance director, so there was a lot of extra time spent on the finance this year, whereas maybe our new executive director, he might spend next year on Parks and Rec stuff. So it's gonna shift. So that's the one thing, is that it's gonna be hard to find a formula to say, well, X% of administration goes to Park and Rec, X% of administration goes to this program. So that's what but they wanna kinda get a handle on what those percentages are, and then we'll need to make a decision as to whether we have an overhead that's an admin charge to cover those expenses, rather than billing them back to the program, but at least we have an idea of where those expenses are going and what they're used for as far as program. But again, it's gonna shift from year to year depending on the focus of COG. So does that make sense?
Sounds like
I
a
think
positive
Ben-
upgrade.
I think Ben's trying to get a handle on costs and actually better define what the costs are for each of the things that each of
Yes.
the programs that they're doing.
Yes, and it's been on the finance committee's list for a while, and we kind of pushed for it this year, and I think with Ben coming on, it was just a perfect alignment that we all think this is necessary, and to try to, because admin is obviously one of those things that doesn't bring in a revenue, but it's always an expense, but where are those expenses really being played out, so.
And that gets spread among all the different programs. all the
Right, but
different
that may,
departments.
it also may have
In
an
other
impact.
words, we all pay
on-
for it.
Right, and it may have an impact on the budget that we see, because we may now see, again, it depends on how they do this, we may say, this is the admin charge, for each township based on the uses that you use for COG. We may see that, shift in dollars for that, so. And then that's a pretty big thing. There is one other thing that got brought up today, that we're gonna see in general forum. So they were notified for 2022 two taxes, there was an issue in filing for the 1099. It was filed late. And basically what happened is when we lost our previous finance person, all the communication in terms of those filings went to that person's email address, which was no longer with COG. And so IRS finally caught up that the 2022 1099 NEC was filed late. So in the process of figuring out what happened with that filing for 2022, they also discovered 2023 hasn't been filed. It just got filed. So IRS has already issued a penalty, a tier 1 penalty, which is the lowest form for the 2022 infraction, which is significant dollars. The 2023, we won't know if they're gonna file a penalty for that for 12 to 18 months out, just because we noticed it before the IRS did. But that full penalty could be a big chunk of change. What we're hoping for is, because we caught it and we did good faith, that the COG did good faith, that best case scenario, we have to pay the interest only and not the actual fine. But just know you're gonna hear those, and those are pretty significant dollar amounts.
Yep.
So,
Do you have an idea how much it was?
yes, the fine for 2022 infraction is $7,200. And that does not include interest, that's, I think, just the fine. The potential penalty, which is actually, could be a tier 3 penalty for 2023, could be $34,000. That does not include interest. So again, they're hoping that in good faith, because we've noticed it, we've notified the IRS of this issue, and have actually, they've already put some policies in place, and Kim's working on some other policies so that this doesn't happen again. We're hoping that good faith, maybe by the time the IRS does address it, that we don't pay the $34,000, we pay the interest, which is probably gonna be $6,000 or $7,000.
But how did they not file the 2023 return?
Because I don't exactly know how it wasn't filed. I think what was happening is the communication for that was still going to the previous finance person's email, and there was no other person on the contact. One of the policies that they put in place, and Kim has already made that change, is not only does the notification come to Kim, but it comes to all of the finance staff. So that there's multiple avenues that the IRS contacts.
I mean, it didn't change the communication route?
It
From
was
Joe to
one of those
Kim?
multiple things with the change in director, change in finance, it was overlooked. I'm sure accidents happen. Nobody knew that it was only going to one person. So I think we're just, we got caught in that pickle of stacking changes. But just as a heads up, that's gonna be discussed.
I think they should also have some kind of policy. I know other companies I work for, usually when somebody leaves, there's still somebody monitoring or watching somebody's email for a while.
And I think in this case, it sounds like that perhaps it was shut down, that it didn't remain
Or at
active.
least
But this isn't the first time the finance director's changed. I mean, this isn't the first time that staff changes.
It could've just
This
been
organization's
timing
been
and
in existence since the late 60s.
Well, and
It's
part of
like-
the problem
I
was it was
sound-
only going to one person.
Well,
So,
that's the decision of the management of the COG to do that. They're the ones that are the policymakers. It's not the elected officials that sit on the committees, it's the staff the professional staff that do this all the time and get paid well to do it. I'm serious concerns about what I'm hearing. That a simple tax form is not something that should be screwed up like that. I mean, and I'm on the executive committee and I'm the chair of the COG, and I don't like what I'm hearing. So, I guess, but you guys have been trying to address it as best you can. Ben hasn't mentioned it to me.
no, I think I know the 2023 was just handled. I don't know when they discovered the issue with the 2022. I don't know what the time frame is. I didn't ask that today in the meeting, but Kim was on it right away. And so that's how they caught the 2023 wasn't filed. So, and part of it also with the 2022, is there was a time frame, and I think this is where the 2022 penalty comes from, is there was actually, part of the issue was IRS changed the time, and it used to be due at the end of February, and they changed it to the end of January. And again, that communication didn't come through to the finance group. because it just got lost.
From the IRS
So that was-
perspective, it did.
Well, yes, and so that was part of the problem with 2022. But the 2023 just was obviously overlooked for a long period of time, so. And I think the current staff was not aware that it wasn't filed, so,
All I can say is stay on it if you would, please.
yeah,
I'll be
yeah.
on it tomorrow.
So, but, you know, the staff has been handling it, and I'm sure it'll get brought up at the, general forum. So just a heads up.
Also, we had an Upper Bald Eagle Halfmoon COG meeting Tuesday night, and I did not report on it, so it's not linked to the agenda. I should have sent it Wednesday. I didn't realize it could still be linked, but I don't know. It's just an oversight on my part. But we did, we had the typical township report, municipal reports, you know, the minutes, the agenda, discussions. We had the finance reports from both the fire company financials and the COG financials. We went through those. The fire company, the fire chief's report had to do with the need for a traffic unit or something to, there was some discussion about replacing the traffic unit with with a truck with an attenuator on the back for safety on the interstate. To, you know, if someone hits that, they don't hit the emergency response people they're responding to an emergency call. So that was discussed, and they're looking at options. And I think the way we left it was they would get back to us with options on that, on the type of equipment that's available. There are a lot of used trucks that attenuators can be attached to. They have I think there's a company in East Freedom that does this kind of work. So they're looking at options to consider, for us to consider, I guess, at the next meeting. The EMS, Mark did give an EMS report about the grants for the, I guess, transportation van.
Yeah.
And I guess you're having trouble with the box ambulance too. It's having some rust issues and some other things. It's a fairly old vehicle. So obviously they're having issues with the equipment again. So, but the grants will buy the transport van and the lift equipment, right, for the ambulances. So I think the other thing that I asked about, the memberships have gone out, the subscriptions, the memberships have gone out, the applications. And of course, they're looking for maximum response to those, and I hope they get it, as well as any. I would urge people to, you know, in addition to paying for the annual fee, you know, put some extra into that envelope, along with the annual subscription fee, because every bit helps. So I just wanted to make a report since I didn't do one in writing at this time.
Thank you. Anybody have anything else? Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? Second. Moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you all for coming.